All right, so hi everyone. My name is Christian. I'm part of the marketing team here at Qit, and thank you so much for being here and welcome to today's webinar, which is entitled The Future of Online Streaming and Ticketing. Just a note on today's recording, it will be recorded so that you can go back and review it or share with a colleague who might have missed it. If you have any questions during the webinar, there should be a Q&A bar at the bottom of your Zoom that you can type in your question, and we've dedicated about 10-15 minutes to the end to review those questions. And with that said, let's get a start on today's presentation by having our panelists introduce themselves. So Niels, would you like to get started?
I can do that. Niels, sitting here in Copenhagen, Denmark, CEO, co-founder of Qit, and have been working within the ticketing business to support that via our usual waiting room for the last 10 years.
And hi, I'm Nicholas. I'm the IT director for the National Theatre in London, and just like Niels, I've been working in the sector for over 20 years, and I've previously worked in a similar capacity for the Barbican Centre and most recently for the South Bank Centre. And over to Ian.
Thanks, Nicholas. Hello, everybody in Zoom land. Greetings from West Sussex. For those of you who don't know, my company Xperiology organises the Ticketing Business Forum and the Ticketing Business Awards and publishes the TicketingBusiness.com newsletter. So I hope you're all safe and well, and thanks for joining us. I'll be joining the panel discussion after the initial presentations. So Christian, over to you.
Yep. Great, thanks so much Niels, Nicholas, and Ian. So I'll just briefly go over an agenda and a note that we'll remove our videos just because it makes it easier for the recording afterwards, but we wanted to make sure to show our faces to everyone here today. So first Niels is going to take us on a bit of a comparison between the traditional ticketing business model and what an online streaming one might look like. Followed up, Nicholas will take an online streaming case study at the Royal National Theatre. And then Ian will be moderating our panel discussion on the future of ticketing with, we have a range of different questions, kind of thought-provoking questions there for some insight. And then, like I mentioned, we have set aside some time for your questions and answers. So feel free to enter those in at any time. So with that said, I'll stop my video here. And Niels, we can start off with the traditional ticketing business model.
Yep, so let's go into that one. Basically the model, as you probably know, most of you, goes from content left to right, from artists to fans, and via a number of intermediates. And the idea is, of course, that the money will then flow back into the system from right to left. So that is pretty much the model as you know it when you are in live entertainment. There is, of course, a couple of key elements in that specific model. And one of the important elements of the model, as you know it now, is that money is paid in advance. In cases, it can be like even up to a full year between the time when the fan is actually paying for the tickets and until the show goes on the stage. But it is also really about like capturing that light in the bottle and the experience and sensation and feeling about being close to the artist in that whatever live environment and enjoy what is around this. Another key factor here is that whoever is setting that specific live entertainment up will have a monopoly in that given time and space where it's happening. And everybody, like being part of it, is part of that monopoly experience where everybody outside it will sort of just be outsiders. And the last very interesting and key element in this here is that that monopoly experience can be repeated multiple times. So just to take like a huge global or international artist, say Rolling Stones, they will be able to do a world tour where it's basically the same sort of set of songs and whatever, and then go to 50 different cities over a couple of years and still ending up by doing something that is unique in the sense of time and space. If we go into the streaming model and just try to look a little bit into how that entire business flow is looking, you can ask yourself whether sort of some of the middle parts of this here is really necessary, or whether they can sort of end up by being squeezed out. Meaning that it is tempting to believe that you can take stream content directly, basically from an artist and directly to a fan. But the experience we have seen and over the last 2 to 3 months, when we have been in Corona land, on looking into some of the biggest streaming events that we have been able to look into, those events sort of tend to look at in a way where the agents and promoters has been a very central and integrated part of getting some of the biggest ones we have seen up running. And as a couple of examples, we have seen a huge live streamed event by BTS. I think they had close to 1 million users and grossed, I think it was $80 million or something. And that was done on the promoter/agents integrated app platform that Big Hit have created. But again, they were able to pull some big stuff on that one. The other one we have seen, and that is also pretty interesting, is this Garth Brooks, where it was like a drive-in stream video. So you needed to go into a drive-in place. I think there was 400 different venues set up in, or locations set up in US, where you could then go on a big screen, sit in your car and enjoy that experience. And it came at a relatively high ticketing price, around $100. And you can imagine that that is, of course, something where it's possible to pull in some money. But in the entire setup of these two big ones here, it is, let's say, way more entities included than just the artist and the fan. A big set of people working towards getting it into those volumes. The stream model does, of course, have something you need to go and consider. And the first one is, do you really think that you're able to keep that monopoly around the digital copies? Because they can obviously and will be safe and distributed. And as you probably know, especially if you go and talk to your kids, you would know that that can happen even real time. The other part of this here is the question whether you are able to replicate the revenue that you see in the traditional model and still sort of get into the same financial goals. Meaning, would you be able to do it in the same level as a global tour where you repeat the same content 50 times? That is probably doubtful. And the last sort of thing here to also consider is the entire set of insights that you would normally be able to get out of a live performance, all the way from the artist being on the scene and see how the audience is reacting, and let's say moving around and whatever is happening. And just to give an example, what will definitely not work, and that is to pull your stream content onto YouTube, because then all that insights will be going away. Then the entire psychology on let's say people and the way that they look on online products, would you able sort of really be able to let them get over a longer period the same sensation around streamed content, especially on the pricing and the sensitivity around it, as you have on online performances? And another, of course, very big consideration here is that it looks like, if you look into YouTube and other places, that there is a very short head on top artists who can actually make some money out of streaming, and that is whether it is YouTube or Spotify or whatever. Very few can make a living out of that part of the equation. If we, in general, are looking into how streaming is sort of converted into revenue, you can see, of course, a lot of sort of research done into it. But in general, you need to do a lot of chunks of streams to get into the same level of revenue as, for example, a album. And if you look at 1,200 streams to be equal one album sale, you know the price of a album wherever you're living. That is a substantial amount of listening that is needed to capture what is a relatively small amount of money, of course. And the other thing you would be up against is the way that the let's say payouts or the money is floating in general in streaming compared to live music. And just to take that research here from Goldman Sachs. So first of all, you can see that out of a $10 paid by a consumer, a substantial amount of that in live music goes to the artist, whereas that portion is, of course, smaller in the streamed world. And then the platform in itself is a proportionally large part of the equation when you're talking about streaming. But it's said that there is some fundamental issues on trying to replicate what we know from live events. And then again, the big one here is that the top artist just simply takes so huge a chunk of the revenue, and they would of course be able to survive even at lower levels. But what about the 99%? Would you actually believe that there will be enough for them to want to be part of this equation? But that was just a number of considerations for further discussions, and with that I want to put it in the hands of Nicholas to come with some real experiences from real life and get you into that.
Yeah, thanks so much, Niels. That was really interesting. And again, thanks so much for having me here. Yeah, so National Theatre at Home. It has been described as one of the highlights of lockdown, according to Time Out magazine, and obviously we're all very proud with what we have achieved. It was a ginormous effort that had to be delivered in an extremely short period of time, and obviously in response to having to close the National Theatre to our audiences. You know, we're acutely aware that, you know, we had shows sort of halfway through production or just about to be staged, and we literally within a week had to close shop around everything. Yet again, we still wanted to have a presence in people's lives and enlighten their rather dreary days as they were at the time when everyone was locked in and didn't have much to do. It was set up in an extremely short period of time, and I think that could only have been achieved because the National Theatre is a truly collaborative organization. I've only worked there for just, I think, 7 or 8 months now, but that was one of the first things that did strike me, how everyone really, I think it is easy to do in some respects because you have a single product, you have one art form, and everyone can get behind it. But this wouldn't have succeeded unless everyone got together. And again, I certainly did not lead on this. I was one part of a much bigger team, and everyone played their part. And my focus was mostly on the technical aspects and some of the web aspects of that. The other thing that worked extremely well for us, and I cannot say how grateful we are our generous and very engaged artists. You know, all the actors, performers, musicians, everyone that had already recorded a show through NT Live was extremely generous with sort of helping us clearing rights and sort of, you know, doing some extra work to promote these streams. You know, we've had some fantastic engagement from all our actors. And they did that, you know, literally within sort of a few days. So again, it wouldn't have worked otherwise. The other benefit that really worked in our advantage was the fact that we had gained a lot of experience doing something similar, a slightly different format, but through NT Live. And NT Live, as you may know, is something that is a sort of a product that's been going for nearly 11 years now, and that's effectively streaming live shows into cinemas. And as a result, we were sitting on a vast archive of recordings, and we had a lot of experience in sort of distributing those performances, but also in filming them specifically for a cinema audience, as opposed to just having one static camera looking at the stage. And I think that was a massive differentiator for us. The other thing that worked extremely well, obviously our marketing department is brilliant, and they and the NT Live team also managed to establish some really good relationships with YouTube, and they again were very generous with their time and really helped us out to increase, well, to help us really to stream these shows. The other partner, again, this definitely is not an advert for Qit, but Qit were amazing as well. They really helped us throughout this, because our infrastructure just was not built up to work with the amount of interest we've had. So why did we do this? Okay, so I think the key driver for this was for us to engage audiences, to continue engaging audiences, continue being national, achieving all those business objectives that we have as an institution. And obviously that's definitely worked. The other aspects were purely practical. We had literally our income from ticket sales dropped to nothing overnight. The National does not only sell tickets, it also has a successful enterprises division, which is bars and restaurants, and also NT Live, which streams shows across the world. Again, all that, and touring as well, and all that income dried up overnight. So it really helped us raise much needed income from donations. I have to be honest with you, the income we raised from donations did not even go near the income that we've lost as from ticketing. However, it really helped us, and we are more than grateful for everyone that has contributed so generously to us. It also really helped us experimenting with new digital formats. We were really keen to understand what would work, what wouldn't work, and with digital you almost get immediate feedback, and if putting the donation ask at the start is more effective than putting it up 3 or 4 times throughout the performance, or you can measure things really quickly and you can adjust very quickly. So it's a truly sort of agile way of delivering things, whereas obviously that's a lot more difficult to do if you have a cinema audience, as it was the case with NT Live, or obviously with a physical theatre audience. Works very differently, particularly around donating income. Right, and obviously I'm here to provide technical solutions and find solutions to something that we've never really had to be faced with before. I think the first was really practical, actually, time constraints. How the hell do we make this happen when literally the entire organization is working from home? Not everyone had work laptops. Some people were dialing in from 10-year-old dodgy iPads and things like that. So how the hell do we make sure that our teams communicate well enough? Because it had to be a collaborative effort. Luckily, we had just rolled out Teams, Microsoft Teams across the organization. So we very quickly set up some teams where we literally just discussed each sort of screening had its own Teams channel. The marketing team were brilliant in bringing all that together, and obviously the development team were engaged in that. My team were engaged in that. So actually, from a comms perspective, I think the biggest learning for us was, comms are the most important thing during lockdown, and you can make it work. And people adapt to it very, very quickly. The other really practical issue we had, and that was the biggest challenge for my team, was how we access the digital master files that NT Live have from our storage area network that is in the basement of the building, and I think it's got roughly 200 or 300 terabytes of data. And how do we get those files to someone from the NT Live team that lives in North London and has only got a 15 meg upload download line? Again, huge effort. We had to be extremely creative, and thankfully we managed to make that happen. And it did involve using Ubers and hard drives, believe it or not, but it did work. The other thing, and this is where Qt came to the rescue, is will the website be able to cope with a global audience? We've had some pretty busy on-sale periods, but the amount of audience that we experienced during this time was phenomenal. I mean, we broke all records on our website. We knew that our website would not be able to cope. And this is not the purchase part, this is the website itself, being able to cope with such a huge audience. And there was no way we could scale it up in such a short time without any testing. So we had Qt on our main website. It was set at an extremely high rate. So literally, I think it was 1,000 people a minute or something. So we were just throttling the traffic a little bit just to make it get to the point where it doesn't fall over, and it didn't. The other question we had was around our ticketing system. Was Tessitura going to cope with this? And again, using Qt, we absolutely managed to do that. And also, and this is something I definitely urge you to think about if you're thinking of doing this, your profile as an organization will raise hugely, because suddenly everyone is aware around the world who you are. And believe it or not, unfortunately, quite a lot of people you don't really want to be aware of your site will also be aware of it, and that's hackers. And they will try anything to raise their own profile sometimes. So again, definitely make sure you invest in cybersecurity, but you're also fully aware that you could become a target purely because of your success. Right, and how was it received? It was really, really interesting, actually. So what we noticed very, very quickly was that audience behavior and engagement changed almost within 2 or 3 weeks. So the first show we screened was One Man and Two Governors. And we had deliberately, we were trying to create a moment. So the shows were going live at 7 p.m. and then they were available for the next week. And then the week after, we'd have another show going live at 7 p.m. and that would just repeat every week. So initially, the first 2 or 3 shows, literally everyone would log on at 7 p.m., watch the show, massive traffic to the website, massive traffic to YouTube. They would donate in the interval, they would donate at the end of the show, and that was it mostly. Over time, we really noticed that that 7 p.m. moment was no longer that big moment, but people actually figured out that they could watch it later, and a lot of people did. And towards the end of the cycle, we've definitely noticing that we're still achieving some phenomenal viewing figures, but we're achieving those over a week, and we also get people that go back 2 or 3 times to watch something. So that's a massive change in behavior. The other thing you may notice if you go on the website is that we have a ton of donation options. Okay, so initially we had YouTube donations, which I have to say worked extremely well. The one complication of that was that you could only donate in dollars. Okay, luckily we have an American sort of charity that is part of the national, so all the income was going to that, but the donations were in dollars. It was really nice to see that money going up. It was actually quite addictive. What we noticed is the more people donated, literally it was like sheep following. It was brilliant. However, we still had lots of people that didn't feel comfortable donating in dollars, or people that couldn't donate to YouTube because it was an international audience and YouTube isn't available in all countries, specifically around donations. So we then also had roughly 50% YouTube donations, roughly 50% website donations. And then our brilliant development team also came up with some other options, being able to donate with text to donate, which also was extremely effective, and also doing things like PayPal, etc., etc. At the moment, I'll be totally honest with you, we've got way too many options, but we were just curious to see what would work and what wouldn't work. The other really good thing was that our subscribers on YouTube increased from 250,000 to, I think it's more than 670,000 now last time I looked, but when I wrote this presentation, it was that. So that increased enormously. We've had, again, over 12 million views for our shows, and we have a truly global audience. And that is it, I think, from me.
So maybe I'll jump in here and lead a panel discussion. Thanks very much, Nicholas. Thanks, Niels, for setting the scene. The audience has been very active in the chat area. Could I ask you to put any questions you've got into the Q&A button? And that's on the bottom of your screen on the right-hand side of the center buttons on Zoom. And then we can either pick these up now or maybe answer them after the event if we can't get round to them in the remaining time. Congratulations, Nick. I think NT at Home has indeed been one of those highlights of lockdown. There haven't been many.
Yeah. Can I also say, before I just need to do a quick plug for NT at Home. We are up for being voted on as a cultural savior. So if you've enjoyed this presentation and if you like NT at Home, can you please head to the to the Time Out page and vote us up. Thank you.
That'd be nice to be labelled as a cultural saviour in these times of cultural abandonment and cultural despair, I would say.
Okay, I mean, ask the question there, yeah?
Yeah, good. Donations, I don't know if you've put out any figures publicly, but what sort of money are we talking about, a typical donation?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Look, I don't think I can discuss figures. I don't think that would be fair to the rest of the organisation. So I really would not feel comfortable giving you a figure here, but it definitely was not 18 million, but it was still a very, very generous and substantial amount. So we are talking about a very, very decent figure. It was definitely worth it.
And in terms of followers, there was a figure there, 670,000. Is that followers just on YouTube, or is that across all your social channels?
No, that's 670,000. 670,000 is the subscribers to YouTube. Okay, that is the number of subscribers we now have to our channel. For the viewers, I think we had 2 million. I need to dig up the figures, but it was definitely more than 750,000 viewers, I think, for One Man and Two Governors. I think it may have been 2 million viewers or something like that, if I remember well.
So, I mean, why didn't you charge for these views? The idea of not ticketing it.
Look, I think the National is very much about reaching audiences. I really felt we wanted to be altruistic and offer something to people to experience theatre, particularly experience theatre in countries that may never have had access to that. I don't think at the time it felt right to charge for something and sort of close that behind the paywall, particularly in the climate of COVID-19. But at the same time, I think us asking people to donate, I think was a very it was a good compromise in terms of charging for content versus fulfilling our social mission and our purpose.
Okay, thanks. I think the rise of streaming, as it were, is nothing new. I think for the ticketing industry, that is perhaps the new aspect to it. I think, Christian, can you just move the slide on for us? Thanks. I mean, this was a survey of BPI in 2019. I mean, basically half the UK population is video streaming on a typical day. So nothing really new about that in terms of watching content on your mobile devices and YouTube. But I think with NT Live, you had the live stream, as it were, to a venue-based audience.
Yes, exactly.
And you've now gone to the recording stream to a global web-based audience.
Yeah, exactly. And I think there's another question I could just see from Liz Nelson saying, how do you make sure your performance isn't shared by the initial buyer or someone that has streamed it? And that was something I was discussing with Ian and Niels just before this streaming started. That is a huge problem. And I think if you are thinking of doing this, you need to be aware that, you know, even with the best DRM solution out there, it is still possible for people to rip content off and then do things with that. So that is a risk you need to be aware of. The only thing you can do to stop that is, well, there's two other things you can do. Either you can employ some companies that can help you safeguard your content. There's specialist companies out there that literally, you know, scour the entire internet trying to figure this out, and also to be proactive. You know, we've had some people do some pretty unsavory stuff, like, for example, ripping the content and putting it behind a paywall. You know, things like that. We were really, really good in catching that very, very quickly and stopping it. But going back to the sort of cybersecurity element, yes, you know, don't be naive and think, okay, I'm going to put it out there and everyone is going to play by the rules. They're not, and you just need to be aware of that.
Yeah. I think that exact issue has been an issue since Napster,
Yeah.
and a lot of people have worked on solutions, and it's very clear that there is no real way of preventing this. And if you go and ask your kids on how you get access to any kind of stream content, they will be able to tell you the tricks around getting into any sort of paid stream without paying for it. So that is really a concern around this here, but it leads me to think about one of the use cases where we are helping in Qt, where it's streaming sports, but where it's a pay-per-view, typically a relatively large sports event, and it's very clear that it is possible to earn money out of doing it that way. And the interesting thing about that entire concept is that it's more or less the same as what we have described here, except for one thing, and that is that the outcome when it starts is unknown. And it's just something of a idea. Would it really be possible to do Madame Butterfly with a unknown outcome, or is there a little bit of learning, at least in that part of the understanding of how you would actually be able to get some money out of it?
Are you seeing very different behaviors in the queues, Niels, for streamed events versus
yeah, but they let's say there is let's say you're saying 12 million viewers, but if it's like a UEFA soccer match or whatever, you can easily get up in those numbers just for one show. So again, some of the stream content where there is a unknown result, you can actually get a lot of people into to be stick with that until the result is known, and then it's of course floating out on all the free platforms afterwards, and then the value is of course gone from that time on.
Yeah, of course. Nick?
Yeah, Ian, can I just answer a couple of questions, because I think,
well, I think let's flip through the slides we've got.
Yeah, sorry, let's do that.
I think there's some great stuff in the Q&A. So I think the driver behind all this is why are you? Why are they? Why is anyone streaming? You talked about the main thing at NT being, you know, engaging with audiences and keeping the profile out there. Was it about getting a new audience as such? Is there any signs that you can convert these people at all? Absolutely.
I mean, this is definitely the audience that we had that watched NT at home up to a large extent was very new. Also, it was a lot more international than what we're used to, and you know, again, our internal teams, our marketing team is looking at that right now, you know, trying to understand, you know, exactly what happened then, and you know, how to engage that new audience. Absolutely. But it definitely was definitely not the usual sort of audience that we'd get from the UK. It was a lot, you know, it was very international, and it was actually lovely watching the chat during an event, because you could actually see, you know, some people, you know, lots of people whose English wasn't their first language. But also was great was that at all the shows were audio described, and again there was a massive uptake there for audio transcribed performances, and again that makes our products or our shows a lot more accessible than they'd normally be.
I think some of the questions coming in are very much around the business possibilities and the revenue streams of that. I think, again, referring to this Goldman Sachs study, that, you know, live stream concerts are a bet on the future. And we're seeing the opportunity to sell beyond the capacity of the venue. So, Niels, do you?
Yeah, but I think that there's two perspectives on it. Saying that you have a venue and there's people outside the venue, you would probably be able to either monetize or at least get them in to get some emotions about what you're doing by taking it outside the venue. And the other part of it is, and again, like trying to go into some other industries where the stream and the video and that real time, very close on, gives people who are sitting very, very far away from the center a way better view into what is going on. And go and watch a hockey match in US. You have that big screen in the middle where you get, even if you're sitting all the way up in the back, you will get way higher value out of the seat in itself by actually having access to that video with a very close up on. So it might be that sort of the stream and whatever in a live performance can actually supplement people outside the venue, but even give higher value to those sitting in the venue.
Nicholas, it might sound a bit strange, but was NT worried about diluting audience? It sounds like this was all about finding new audiences and engaging them, but there's a potential, isn't there, that you put on a really good show and people say, it's really nice watching this at home. Like I watch the football, I never go to the stadium, and I never go back to the theatre now.
I think it's really interesting. I think this, just to make it really clear, I think this whole NT's home was really sprung up as a result of COVID, as a result of us wanting to, engage with our audiences. Clearly, the traditional theatre audience couldn't go to the theatre, so that was the only way they could experience theatre. However, there is a magic about theatre that can't be replicated on screen or online. It is still a magical experience, and a lot of people miss that. My personal views, and again, that is something that no one really knows until you've done the research and have looked into it. I think as human beings, we still want to come together and experience things together. That's the reason why cinemas are still in business, when everyone could just watch their things on their screen at home. And likewise, that's why theatre still happens. You can, NT Live, for example, has been extremely successful. It sold 11 million tickets and, has been shown in 65 countries over the last 11 years. And that is it's almost like the different types of audiences and how they feel they want to engage at the time. Going to the theatre is an effort in a positive way. You have to dress up, you have to come together. There might be a time when you just don't feel like it, and you may just want to experience something whilst you're in your slippers and pajamas at home, and that just gives people options, doesn't it? But I don't think it's not mutually exclusive. I think all products have a different experience, and they will always be there. It's like football, for example. People still go and watch football, but a lot of people experience it on television. So it's that.
Just a question for you, Nicholas. Did you have any insights into sort of what people were actually engaged in that stream content, like age groups or?
I don't have those figures. I'm really sorry. I think our marketing team is still looking at all of that. So I don't have that detail, unfortunately.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see what YouTube gives you in terms of data out of this. I think, outside of theatre, you're very lucky at the NT. You are a creative organisation that makes great content. So you've got a really starting point in this. And I think if we look generally at artists and live music and touring, probably the coronavirus has forced them to look at new models, and we've been looking at this direct to fan approach now, which was I think 2014 there were about 10 platforms out there offering direct to fan services, and typically that was buying a t-shirt or a bit of fan memorabilia. But now these are increasingly, I think there's over 40 platforms now we know of where artists can get on there, and it's you know, it's an online shop as well as a ticketing platform, as well as now a streaming platform. Do you see more artists taking that model on and cutting out, if you like, the middlemen in this, the promoters, the venues, and going direct to fans?
Niels, you want to go first? Yeah, you go, Niels.
Yeah, I think that the let's say some of the things that Niklas actually touched upon here is the important factors on this here. It is more than just the isolated performance on the stage. So therefore, there is of course a lot of attempts and whatever to pull additional money out of the system and bypass some of the players in the field. And there is, of course, some who can successfully doing it. And just to mention that BTS, they probably would be able to sustain a okay business from their stream and their merchandise and whatever. But the let's say I'm just thinking about like a opera singer going into a opera, staying there for 3 months, having that as a living in London. I would have really difficulty to see that they would be able to do anything near the levels that they are paid where they are now. But that is not excluding that someone is able to do it. But again, there is going to be like 99.5% of the artists that would never ever have any possibilities of making a living out of the direct-to-consumer model.
Okay.
Yeah, and I guess. Sorry.
Thanks. I was thinking, you know, without COVID-19 and the epidemic and the lockdown, with this, NT wouldn't have done this, NT at home. So it's been an experiment, broadly speaking, for you guys.
Yeah, it has, and it's been a very positive experience. And again, I think theatre is slightly different to music, I guess, where, you know, a performance comes together and it's a truly sort of, well, it's a team effort, isn't it? You know, everyone plays their part on stage, and, you know, obviously the actors are an extremely important part of it, but you also have directors, you know, producers and everyone. I guess it depends on the show as well, you know, whether the D2C model will work. I mean, it really depends on what the product is, but I think for these sort of traditional national theatre productions, which are sort of best of breed, really, I don't think an online experience on a D2C model would work unless you are sort of a super fan of a specific of an actor, and that actor really helps you out with something. What was extremely useful though for us, again, I cannot stress how, you know, generous these actors have been. You know, they've taken part in you know, a NT at home quiz, which had great engagement. You know, they did some brilliant, you know, promotional materials for us. And again, that had a massive impact in how people learned and experienced that. And it was really nice to see that, and that immediacy, which you don't necessarily get when you have a sort of physical show, and I think was great. This was sort of equivalent of, you know, people waiting for an autograph at the stage door, which is not quite the same as someone really sort of talking to you and getting very personal with you.
So, I mean, where does it fit into NT strategy going forward? You know, is this an additional channel to reach audiences? Is it a plug-in when you've sold out?
Look, I have to be honest with you. I think you can only make. I'm a big fan of, and this may sound a bit like a cliche, but I'm a big fan of making sort of data-driven decisions. We are at the point at the moment where we are still analyzing all the data, and we are looking at, you know, how that will possibly translate. You know, what could the business model potentially be? You know, could we replicate the amazing success of NT Live? At the moment, we are still evaluating things. You know, I haven't got those answers for you, unfortunately, because we don't want to rush into anything. But at the same time, we still want to be experimental, and we want to test things and see what works and what doesn't work. But we're only going to do that if the data we get out of it is meaningful and will help us down the right direction.
Very good. Let's skip forward to, because there's a load of questions in. I'd like to get to them. But some of the considerations for making successful live streaming events. Niels, from your side, bandwidth, I guess.
Yeah, but I'll say that the production is, of course, like key on really get the multiple cameras and really get it up close and the light and whatever is necessary. And the other part of it, and I can also see in the questions from the attendees, you need to get a decent streaming platform, and that platform is not a free platform from any of the big search companies in the world. Basically, because you want to have control over who is watching whatever chunk of content you have. So you get your analytics in a very precise manner, and you need to get it down into per minute understanding on who did watch what and who stopped the stream and jumped off and whatever. And there is platforms out there. You can write me afterwards if you want to have some tips on it. But it's not the free one, just to be very clear on that. So
with the free one, you're going to get the broad reach, but not necessarily the depth of data that you need.
On the free one, you are giving the data to big companies that are going to earn money on the data.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that is the way the world is set up.
And I guess and for theatre, I think, again, all this really depends on the art form, okay? So, for example, if you think of this from football perspective, for example, okay, when football is streamed on television, you have 15 cameras on it with slow motion, with, cameras on, pulley strings over the, it's an extremely engaging experience. It's definitely not someone filming from the same viewpoint as someone sitting in the stadium. And I think it's the same thing for theatre, okay? So we've learned a lot from that with NT Live. It's been going for 11 years. And these shows are filmed on 4K cameras with brilliant lighting, fantastic directors, in brilliant sound. It needs to be done properly. You can't just expect, sticking two cameras into the auditorium and trying to sell that. It's not going to work. And I think with NT Live, for example, that had the limitation of it being a one-way experience where you couldn't actually interact with the actors. You experienced it as it was happening. Again, I'm not saying we're doing this right now, but there's certainly more you can explore around, can a digital theatre performance be more engaging than something you would have on stage? And again, I don't think anyone has got the answers to that. I think some people have done some brilliant experiments around it, but definitely that medium gives you a lot of possibilities. And I think that's definitely something that I think we should explore, but again, it's not really my call. I'm the IT director, I'm not the artistic sort of lead, and I know that these people are got brilliant brains and are thinking of that all the time.
The creative types will come up with creative.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure they are definitely, we have the best people here. So yeah.
I mean, I think from the streams I've seen and the experiments I've experienced, interaction and audience engagement are some of the key criteria for making a successful live stream. I think otherwise it's just the equivalent of watching a DVD.
Yeah, exactly. And you don't want that.
And we've seen some bands like Orchestral Maneuvers in the Dark, OMD, replaying a 2019 concert, but doing a live Q&A with their fan base and offering giveaways and effectively offering behind the scenes footage, or even live streams of rehearsals or live streams of behind the curtain call. That kind of added on content I can see being of great value even post lockdown and as the industry reopens. Let's pick up on some of these great questions. I mean, Nicholas, how long do people spend watching? How long before they switch off?
Yeah, this was brilliant actually. I mean, this was brilliant in terms of us being able to tell what people were up to. So, just to put it in context, we had our our shows started streaming at 7 p.m. At 8 p.m. there was, if you remember well, the Clap for Carers sort of initiative in the UK. So basically at 8 o'clock, we'd have lots of people in chat saying, now clap for carers. And literally for 10 minutes, you could literally see people pausing or not watching, okay? 10 minutes later, they'd all come back en masse. We were really, really surprised how engaged audiences remained. So, initially you think, oh, they may start all watching at the start and how many people are going to drop off, but they really stuck through it. And some of these shows are very long, and there's a reason why they're so long, because they have to be, because they are the pieces of the creative pieces, but they're not your 1 hour 20-minute Netflix show, but still people very much engaged, which was a big surprise.
And in terms of asking people to pay versus pay what you like or donate, or
well, look, I mean,
what are the drivers there? What are you seeing?
Well, look, I mean, we have not experimented with sort of putting things behind a paywall or doing other having a pay-per-view type model or subscription model. It was very much donate as much as you're comfortable with. And people were very generous. We really did not expect people, donating 20, 30 pounds to us. And it was across the world. And it was really interesting, actually. And people that could just afford, £3 to £5 or £1, would still be able to do that. But people were very, very generous, and we can only thank them for that.
Well, £1 is a lot more than 0.00006.
Yeah,
of
exactly.
a penny from
yeah. Again, please remember, these are extraordinary circumstances. People felt very much, people that love the theatre really wanted us to do well. So I'm not sure whether we'd be able to replicate this model, 12 months down the line, when hopefully a vaccine has been found and, we're back to normal. But clearly, at the time, for the last 2 or 3 months, this has worked extremely well for us.
And in terms of getting those donations, what were the most effective ways of
I think as we experimented. I think it was very much a case of, I think it was a combination. I think our marketing team and development team did a great job in sort of weaving that into discussions, asking actors to do some brilliant promotional material, running marketing campaigns online about it. Also in the shows themselves, there were calls to action. So really call to action at the start, and we had a call to action at the end, and that's when everyone started donating, particularly at the end. It was almost like, rather than clapping, they were donating, which was brilliant. It was a lovely thing to see, actually.
And text to donate, is that
yeah, text to donate was, I have to be honest with you, I was a very big skeptic, but it really worked. So I eat my hat on that. So
even internationally with different.
No, this was just for, I'm sorry, it was just for UK audience.
UK.
But it definitely was very effective for UK audience, and I really did not expect that.
Okay.
But obviously our development team know not better than I do, so yeah.
Niels, you must have seen a lot of your ticketing clients. We've certainly reported on them all adding a live stream service to their ticketing functionality. Is that...
Yeah. You can in general see that our ticketing clients are doing one of two things. So either they sort of do nothing and just wait it out, and then we have seen a lot of our customers trying to do something, and stream is definitely one of the way of moving stuff forward. And the other sort of behavior is that we have seen some of our clients going into something completely different. For example, one of our clients in Asia recreated or rewrote their platform so they could help with donations for healthcare workers. And they were just like sitting there getting donation in for helping healthcare workers. And what they actually experienced was a huge sort of interest around their platform and what they did. And they actually created a lot of positive vibration around what they did. And it might be that is even a better marketing strategy than doing a live streaming sort of part of your business, because I honestly believe that live stream we have been talking about here in the Corona time is probably a little bit of a surrogate for the real stuff, and hopefully the real stuff is not that far away.
Well, here on that side. Nick, we've still got a bit of time. Do you want to pick up on Caroline's questions there about what about producing events for streaming only?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really interesting question, actually. Yeah, I think once it becomes clearer once it becomes clearer creatively what we can and can't do, and what will work and won't work, I think it's very much, again, this is not the official line. This is purely what I think we should do. However, I think that experimenting with these formats is what's important, and learning from what works and what doesn't work. You know, we may produce something that is for online audiences only and is hugely successful and is almost like a template for success, or it might come out that you know, it doesn't work. And my sort of engagement with digital projects previously has been that things you sometimes think are never going to work really work, and other things where you think you've got a winning formula don't. And I think digital gives you that luxury of being able to measure and test, and obviously start small. You know, don't sort of, you know, sink millions of pounds into something. But again, this is my personal view. I need to be really clear on that. I think any sort of creative decisions are really not mine to make. But clearly, you know, as I said, our producing team at the National is definitely looking at all those options. Yeah.
Niels, do you see a lot more of the arts organisations creating channels and potentially subscription models, or their own, you know, broadcast entertainment service?
It depends a little bit about what their business model is, and in US, UK, in general, sponsorship and donation is a big chunk of your operating income. And here you can say that you basically do something, not necessarily to do revenue on the streaming, but to make sure that your sponsors and whatever remember you when you're sending your invoice or whatever you're doing. So we have seen a lot, and really some pretty nice productions, and also put in for the patrons and fans in the aftermath of the actual streamed event, and where it for 100% sure have given a lot of value, not necessarily in direct money, but most likely in indirect sort of awareness and other stuff.
I think we can see a lot more of the brands and sponsors coming into this space. It's a low cost entry point in terms of sponsorship, with potential for huge visibility. Nicholas, I noticed NT didn't really roll out any brands alongside its own on this. Was that a deliberate part?
I think it was just a matter of time, you know. I have to say, you know, for example, YouTube were very generous, you know, they really helped us out. And yeah, but I mean, this wasn't something we planned. You know, we had sort of 6 months or a very long-term strategy to plan. You know, this was literally like, oh shit, what do we do now? And that's what we came up with. And of course, we're going to think of this properly. Now we have the luxury of time and the benefit of hindsight, and what worked and what didn't work. And I'm pretty sure that we'll come up with something even better. But yeah, I think we just did the best we could at the time.
Great. I think we're pretty much there on the time. I'm conscious there's still quite a few questions unanswered. We've got those here in the feed, and I think, yeah, we'll try and pick those up offline with you individually and directly. If you've got any other questions, please come back to us. The emails are there. If you want to comment on this or share some thoughts, then there's a hashtag #TicketingFuture. Wherever you post it, please let us know. I think in summary, it's been an incredible period for experimentation in this area of live streaming. Ticketing platforms have moved into it very quickly. I see it as an add-on service. I think be aware of security issues. I think be very clear about why you're doing it in the first place. Is it to drive revenues? Is it to drive audience? Is it to keep a brand or sponsor happy? But I think there's certainly a lot more of this to come forward. And my thanks to Kiewit and Niels and Nicholas for organising this, and to Anna and Christian for hosting us today. Thanks for everyone in the audience. It's been a pleasure being with you. Thanks very much.
Cool. Thanks.
Thank
Stay safe out there.
And feel free to email if you have any questions.
Meantime, keep safe and well, and I hope we can all meet again live in person at venues very soon.